Welcome to this session. Welcome everyone joining us online. And my name is Ezine Ifeanyi. I'm from the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Jesus Assembly, Gainesville. I'm happy to be here. Today we're going to be discussing the topic parenting, and I have the privilege of discussing this topic with me, Pastor Mrs. Vivian Olubaki.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this discussion.
Welcome, Ma. Thank you for joining us today. And I would like to introduce our guest that's going to be discussing this topic, Deaconess Bola Odetokun. She's a certified data privacy solutions engineer, and she has so many other certifications. She has a passion for working with families, youth, and young adults. She's also the founder and CEO of the Parenting Resource Initiatives. It's a nonprofit faith-based organization that encourages, supports, and provides resources for families. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, ma'am.
So today we're going to be discussing on parenting. Please, ma'am, I would like you to enlighten us what it really means, what parenting really means, because sometimes we just feel it's just giving birth and then you become a parent, or parenting entails. Please, ma'am, I would like you to tell us more about parenting and what it really entails.
Well, I'll say it, and I always tell people this: parenting is a full-time ministry. You can see it as a vocation, you can see it as a ministry or a call, but whichever way you see it, it is something that demands your whole time, your whole attention, and it cannot be outsourced. A parent is someone who nurtures another human being. We normally think of just, the mother and the child, or the biological child. But my understanding of it and my perspective of it is whenever God brings somebody your way who you are in a position to nurture, to guide, to help them grow, you are a parent to that person. And because of our culture, we may think that, okay, I have to be a certain age, there has to be a certain age gap, age difference between a parent and a child, which for the most part is true. But I really see it as having the ability or the opportunity to nurture. Once you have that ability or you have that opportunity to nurture someone, you are technically a parent over them. Some people would say, okay, maybe a mentor and that kind of stuff. But a parent is much more than being a mentor. A parent has awesome responsibilities. In the context of being a Christian, God expects a parent to stand in place for him. As parents, you are actually standing in the place for God over that person. You are helping God to raise another human being, to develop another human being who will help to fulfill God's agenda on earth, because we are all here to fulfill God's agenda on earth. And our role as parents is to ensure that the seeds that come through us, or the people that God gives us influence over, maybe spiritual, children, adopted children, that we are helping to bring them into the place where over time, they are able to fulfill God's agenda on earth. That's who a parent is, somebody who partners with God to bring to pass his agenda on earth.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
When you talked about parenting and you hinged it upon God's agenda, it gave me a very clear view of parenting. So thank you very much, Ma, for that explanation.
You're welcome.
Usually people think being a parent is claiming this life for yourself. Mm-hmm. But from the way you have explained it, it gives us a kind of another background and perspective of looking
ultimately
at
we are just guidance. We are guardians.
We are guardians.
He gave them to us to help him raise. Like he said about Abraham, he said, I know Abraham is going to do this. So it's something that is at the core of his heart. It's at the core of his purpose. So they're not for us. We're just given that opportunity to help raise them and then release them to find the purpose for which he brought them forth. We have that opportunity, we have that assignment, we have that ministry, we have that call to develop them, to grow them, and then release them for that ultimate purpose that God has in mind.
Thank you very much, ma'am. From what you've explained, I understand that in being a parent, we need to find God first and find our purpose in God for us to be able to lead these children that God has committed into our hands to
Yes.
their own purpose.
Yes.
So my question is, how do we know God's purpose for each child that God brings to us, each child that God places in our hands? How do we know God's purpose for their life?
Well, to some extent, we can know God's purpose for each child, but we also have to understand that they are human beings in their own right. And so it's also their own, agenda, to their own assignment to find their purpose. But as people that have been given, we can sense the purpose of God for them. We can actually now, in the place of prayer, help and get clarity. God, what are you saying concerning this child? Which path should they be going? What should they be doing? But we have to now realize that at some point in time, as they become mature, we have to help them into entering into that purpose. We cannot say to them, you have been made to do this, or you have been created to do this, and you must do this. We guide them into discovering that purpose. To the extent that we discover that purpose, we can guide them, but we cannot lord it over them, because they still have to come into a place where they understand the purpose. For instance, we know that Jacob and Esau, whatever happened to them was because the mother was trying to insist on someone. She had a favorite. That's not our goal. That's not our role. We should, in the place of prayer, understand what is the purpose of God for each child as much as possible and guide them in that direction, and then begin to give them the opportunities, the training, the development, the skills that they need to develop into that purpose. So we are kind of like, we're like stepping boards for them. We give them the education, we give them the home training, we help them to discover their talents, we help them to discover their skills that will ultimately help them to fulfill that purpose, which in the place of prayer we have sensed. But let me say here that it is not our role to insist that a child be this or be that. Even though we may have understood it in the place of prayer, we are supposed to guide them into the understanding of it, the discovery of it. Like somebody said, there are two important days in your life: the day you are born and the day you discover why. So as parents, after giving birth to them, which is the one important day, the next important day is when, by the grace of God, we have helped them to now discover that purpose. It may have been in our heart, it may have been in our spirit. We have to work with the Holy Spirit to help them come into an understanding of it. I hope I made sense.
You really made sense, Ma. And in addition to what you have said, in response to the question that Sister Ezine asked, I know sometimes also God can give a blueprint of what the child's purpose is. For example, the child Samson in the scriptures in Judges 13, where God told the mom, this child is going to be a Nazirite, he must not do this, he must not do that. So sometimes we can have God tell us, like, God can tell a woman, this child is going to be this child is going to be that. So sometimes the blueprints can come directly from God, or as you have said, we can search it out in the place of prayer.
And again, go ahead.
In addition to that, I just want to ask, what would you tell a working mother? What will you tell? What advice will you offer a working mother in a way in how she can be there for her immediate family and also be able to raise the children in her custody to meet that divine purpose for life?
Well, you have to understand that your primary ministry as a mother is your family. Of course, we need to work to pay our bills. We need to work to, sustain the house, and everything. But you are not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to, even for you as a person that God created and that have chosen or accepted that role of being a wife and a mother, you are never going to be fulfilled if your home and the seed from your home are not doing what God has asked them to do. And it's a conflict because, again, like we said, they have a responsibility. But what I like to tell people is that you have to come into the place where that you have actually created an environment for them to fulfill purpose. You have created an environment. You have created the home training. You have encouraged them to gather the skill. It comes to what you do in your house. Like one of the previous first ladies, I think it's Laura Bush, said, it doesn't matter what happens in the White House. It matters what happens in your house. In the White House, there can be all kinds of policies and everything, but the house, your home, is where you create the environment, where you develop the background for the children to go out and now find purpose. Because even when God gives you a blueprint, what do you do with the blueprint? If you don't help them to understand purpose, if you don't train them up properly, if you don't create an enabling environment where they grow up to be well-rounded, spiritually, academically, intellectually, emotionally, they are well balanced and well-rounded, they're not going to find purpose. They're not going to fulfill purpose. Even if they discover, even if you have an understanding of, even if you put it on your vision board all the time for them, they're not going to fulfill it. They need that enabling environment in the home. And coming back to your question, I have said all this to say that the working mother has to find or has to order her priorities in such a way to know that home is my primary calling. The work, the career is just to help me put food on the table, pay the bills. But my primary calling as a wife and a mother, and I'll say for the father too, your primary calling is to make your home a place where these children can grow and develop and become well-rounded. Everything else that you do is to support that goal. Because don't forget, I said when we started that this is God's agenda. God, the family unit is God's game plan for whatever he's going to do on earth. That's why I created Adam and Eve. So if God is going to fulfill anything on earth, he needs people. Where do the people come from? The home. Who are the leaders in the home? The father and the mother. So that is our primary calling, whichever way we look at it. But in order to fulfill this primary calling, we need to work, we need to pay bills, we need to give things to the children, we need to clothe them, we need to put food on the table. But those other things must not take precedence over your role as a father, as a mother. So when you take up a job, a working mother, a working father, or a stay-at-home, you have to have that perspective that this is my primary assignment. You have to have that perspective. This is my primary assignment. Everything else that I do has to tie into this, not the other way around. And sometimes it's hard because of the situation we find ourselves, because now we have a culture where everything is about, what can I achieve in the corporate space, or what can I achieve in ministry? No, the order is what can you achieve in your home? What is going on in your home?
Thank you very much, ma'am. When it comes to parenting, at what age do we start introducing the children to the values and trying to show them the path?
As soon as they can hear. And, science tells us that they actually start to hear in the womb, that they hear in the womb. So from when you are pregnant, you start to speak scriptures over them. You start to make confessions. And from, as soon as they are born, you again, going back to the enabling environment, you create that environment. I like to have, music going on, scriptures, sometimes I'm in the kitchen. I have thank God for Bible apps. I have my Bible app on, it's playing some scriptures, it's, and sometimes I'm cooking, and so those are the ways that you begin to introduce them. They are hearing it. The Bible talks about line upon line, precept upon precept, a little here, a little there. So you have to start creating that atmosphere. Maybe you are driving in the car, you're going somewhere. And I don't mean this in a way that you now bog them down and everything they hear is all scriptures. But you have to be intentional about putting the seeds in the ground. That's what I call it. You put the seeds in the ground. You have maybe toys or games that are Bible-based puzzles. You have, thank God, we also have Bible apps for kids. You just make sure that your environment has scripture-based stuff in them for their level, age appropriate, and as they grow, you expand the how do I say this? You expand the curriculum, so to say. There are more options as they grow, but as soon as when you are pregnant, you begin to speak scriptures over them. By the time they come into the world, the music that you play in their room, like a lot of families have, you have the baby room and then you have music playing in there when they are sleeping. What kind of music are you playing for them? Because whether we like it or not, these things are spirits. They are spirits. And whether the children can speak or the child can speak yet or not, something is going into their spirit from whatever is playing around them. So it's very important that we intentionally put the seeds of the word of God in the ground, in the atmosphere. Have scriptures on the wall, play music, scripture-based music, watch movies, play games with them. Like if they have Bible on, most of us these days, we don't do CDs anymore because everything is online. But I used to have Bible on CDs that we can play, and then as they grow, there are actually other options which they can use for themselves. But it's not, you don't wait till they are born. You start from when they are in the womb, and then you increase it like that.
Now, talking about creating enabling environments for these children while we are parenting them, how do we do that successfully with children who seem to be a bit willful? They want to do their own thing. They have their own minds. They seem to make their own choices. How would you want parents to come through with such a child?
The most important thing is prayer. Because what we term willful, we can see it as a weakness, but it can actually be a strength. I have a child who is willful. At first, she used to get in trouble. The school will call me several times. I will go there. Sometimes I will go there and come out crying until, but I kept praying. I knew that she's smart and everything. So at some point, God put a teacher in our lives. This teacher had actually taught my other child, and so she went to the school and said, hey, I think she was in a meeting and they were discussing the way they start to try to label you or label your child, and they started to talk about, oh, maybe it's a black thing, maybe there's something going on in their family. And she said, no, I know her, I know the older one, and there's not, in fact, this teacher would come over the weekend and take them out, just take them out to movies or to the the store, just play, or take them to the park and things like that. She just liked, so she was the one that God used for us. And she said, there's nothing going on in the house. Maybe this child is just way above our curriculum. And she asked my permission for her to be tested. And it turned out that willful whatever is because she was at a higher, or she is, well, at that time, she was at a higher level than the curriculum she was being offered. So eventually they tested her. They had to come up with a different plan for her that is higher than the class. Because, for instance, the class is running 30 minutes or 40 minutes. 15 minutes into the class, she's done.
She's done.
And because she doesn't know what else to do, she starts to fidget and cause trouble or talk when she should not talk. And all those things will end up in sending her to the principal's office. And then when that happens 2 or 3 times a week, they call me to come get her. But by the time this teacher was able to intervene and get her tested, and they found out that she's gifted and all of that, they created a separate curriculum for her. And then in addition to that, they made her what is called a peer tutor. So she was teaching other children, and by the grace of God, these other children picked up. So why did I say prayer is important? At that time, while I kept thinking and I kept praying. I kept thinking, I kept praying. God, show us. I know that she's not a bad child. I know she's smart, but I want to understand what is going on. And if God had not placed that teacher for us to speak up at that meeting, she could have been labeled just like that. They would have put her in some kind of intervention program that she didn't need. They could have started, recommending for her to be pumped with, medication and all of that, which would not have solved the issue, because the issue is that the curriculum was not challenging enough for her. No. It wasn't meeting her needs. So when we say we have a willful child, I don't like people using that. I call it a label. And you don't want to label any child. They are strong in their own ways. Their minds are such that they know what they want. Our role is to guide them. So you look at, okay, what are they willfully doing? What do they like to do? You have to understand your own child, and they help channel that willfulness into positive things. For instance, this attitude that my child had helped them in growing up to become somebody who could speak up for herself, speak up for her friends and all of that. She went to boarding school and she succeeded. I was I was terrified when she said she wanted to go. But then before we knew it, she came up with all the requirements and everything. And she was like, look, I meet all the requirements. Why not? So what you call willful, that could have been negative, that same trait is what she's now channeling. And say, okay, I found out this about boarding school. Before you even say Jack, she has done the research. She has come up with all the requirements and she's checking it. A, I meet that requirement. B, I meet that requirement. C, I meet that requirement. D, I meet that requirement. Mommy, daddy, what else? In fact, she will say, okay, tell me, if I make all the grades, are you going to be able to pay? See, she's already thinking ahead. Because now she knows that, okay, there's a money part of it. It's not just my brains. We have to. So what we see as willful and which we feel like, oh, maybe that child is confronting us. How about we flip it around and say, maybe this child is a leader in the making. Maybe this child is somebody who is going to be able to stand up, speak for herself, speak for her friends, and be able to guide others. Why must we see it as something negative? But like I said, you have to guide that strength in the place of prayer. It's the same energy. It's just that you have to channel it to the right direction. Okay. And that comes back to giving them the opportunities. Many of our children, the reason why they seem to be defiant is because we don't even give them, they don't have enough opportunities to explore and to expand their thinking. We've caged them, we've put them in a box, and that box is too small for them. So they are constantly trying to, break out of the box. And you keep putting them back inside. Say, shut up, sit down. And then you now say, oh, she's too willful. He's too willful. He only wants to do what he wants to do. Is there anything wrong about that? There's nothing wrong about that. Why don't you find out what he wants to do? Why don't you try and understand what appeals to them? Must it be always what you want them to do? No. That is the place where you sit down and say, okay, what do you like to do? What are the things? Give me, like sometimes I'll say, give me 3 things. If I can't afford one, maybe I can afford 2, or maybe I can afford 3. So let them explore, go beyond just school and church. Especially for us Christians, it's just school and church, nothing else. We don't let them explore other things. So when we box them, after a while they will rebel, because you're not allowing them to give expression to what is on their inside. And we now say they are willful. Willful about what? And that is not to say that there are not some children that are actually willful and stubborn and defiant. But I like to understand what is the background story. Because before a child becomes willful, there must be something that they are struggling with that is not finding expression. Something that they would love to do. Something that they would love to understand. And we are just not giving them that space. And it's now manifesting as stubbornness, willfulness, hot-headedness. That's the way I see it.